We see the presence of a gang inside a maximum security prison, and they were heading to the bathroom in which there was a person named Bone. Danny tells Bone that a gang is on the prowl for murderers. Danny emerges when the gang members enter the restroom. Bone is warned by the gang boss that he will regret not joining them. As he informs the gang leader that he will offer them a chance to flee, Bone takes off his shirt. However, the group boss was making fun of what Bone had said. When the gang boss attacks Bone, he is swiftly struck and stabbed. The gang members attempt to strike Bone, but due to his fighting prowess, he hits them in a matter of seconds. He instructs the gang leader that he needs to send a warning to everyone attempting to harm him. Then Bone is released from jail and checks into a motel to make a reservation. When he finally runs into the hotel's proprietor, Tamara, she shows him to his room and tells him she doesn't want any trouble from him. She is informed that he is also averse to danger. Bone then makes his way to the arena where wagers are being made for street fights. He observes a fight between two individuals before seeing James and his men approach in a fleet of posh cars. The next battle is then announced by Pinball, the fight's organizer. Two fighters squared off in the match, one of whom was Hammerman, a James employee who had never lost a battle before. And when the battle between them starts, Hammerman severely hurts the opposing fighter. Hammerman then prevails in the battle, after giving James the amount of the bets. Pinball leaves the area in his vehicle. However, Bone's presence in the car surprises him, and Pinball initially believed Bone was attempting to rob him. But Bone requests that he set up a battle between Hammerman and himself. At first, Pinball declines because he informs Bone that he is a relatively unknown fighter, and that he requires a sizable sum of money to arrange this battle for him. Informing Pinball that it is all he has, Bone gives him $250. We see James getting a call from a significant individual named Franklin, who requests that James get rid of a man by the name of Daryl. James concurs but sees Franklin as standing by in his car. James is visited by Pinball and Bone, who both introduce Bone as the new combatant. James realizes that Bone has been staring at his fiancée, Angela, the entire time, which has upset James. James cautions his companion Angela not to view Bone in such a way. Bone is cautioned by Pinball not to do what he did with this female again. James and his troops leave the area. Bone's first battle with another fighter is set up by Pinball. The fighter Bone was facing was quite large, but Bone observes that the fighter moves slowly. When the battle starts, Bone strikes this opponent and delivers a fatal blow, enabling him to quickly prevail. Pinball was pleased with Bone's victory and promises him that he will arrange fights outside of the city for him to gain notoriety before setting up a contest between him and Hammer. When Pinball was chatting with Bone about James' acquaintance Angela, he revealed to him that she was married and carrying another man's child. However, James forcibly separated her from her spouse after planning his murder and locking him up. He reveals to him that James had hidden Angela and her child in an unidentified location, where Angela was using drugs and had a miserable existence. Daryl and his girlfriend, whom Franklin had advised him to divorce, were dining with James and his men. James starts singing and invites everyone to join him after asking Daryl's partner to start playing music. However, James abruptly pulls out a sword and stabs Daryl before asking Hammerman to turn up the music and hitting Daryl repeatedly until he dies. In Bone's hotel suite, we watch Bone. Additionally, James is seen at home, where he encounters Angela and confronts her for ignoring him. James was with one of his guys, Teddy, on the second day. Teddy plays a video of Bone's successful battle. James requests that he retrieve all of the hotel's records pertaining to Bone. When Tamara sees that Gerard was having a meeting with a street group, she warns him to avoid them. They refuse to leave when old Roberto asked them to and continued calling him names. When Bone appears, they immediately flee. When Pinball arrives to pick up Bone, they ride together to a different location to witness a street fight. In the fight, two girls engaged in it, and Veretta, one of the girls, managed to emerge victorious. Pinball visits a man called Tattoo who had fighters and agrees to help him set up a match between one of the Tattoo fighters and Bone. Bone observes his opponent's shoulder dropping as he delivered blows before the battle even started. And when the battle starts, Bone strikes his opponent fatally, finishing him off with a single blow. Pinball informs Tattoo, who is ecstatic, that Bone can defeat two opponents at once. He is informed by Tattoo that warriors are available. The bet has doubled, and Pinball feels engaged. As soon as the battle starts, Bone strikes out the first opponent. The second individual was then struck, breaking his hand. Tattoo is offered the chance to battle again if Bone doubles the wager. Tattoo requests that 10 combatants take on Bone. All of them were destroyed by Bone's crushing strikes. Tattoo brandished a pistol at Bone, so Bone took the money by force. Verta provided Bone her phone number because she was fixated on him. As Bone continues to practice, Pinball arranges street fights for him, and Bone prevails in every one of them. Bone and Pinball are very wealthy and appear to be rising in fame. Bone takes part in battles with a lot on the line and wins every one of them. When Tamara spots Bone returning to the motel with a minor wound, she tends to it. When Bone inquires about the children she is raising with her, she replies that she has been doing so for nearly 3 years. However, Gerard, the kid, has only been looking after him for a year. Tachai was popular with Tamara. She learns the fundamentals of the discipline from Bone. She observes him instruct Gerard in the fundamentals of this activity on the second day. James was driving his vehicle after a girl because he thought she had revealed information about him. James crushed the girl with a car despite her pleading with him not to harm her. James orders Teddy to depart as Roberto watches what he did. When Teddy and Hummerman were riding in the vehicle together, Hummerman was doping when Bone confronted him. James is told by Pinball that Bone will prevail in the battle. The combatants get ready to begin. Bone was quick and was able to avoid the strikes that the Hummerman attempted to land on him. Then, after numerous hits from Bone, Hummerman is unable to avoid them. After that, Bone uses his foot to take out Hummerman. Pinball announces Bone as the winner and then approaches James to accept a winning bet, who is furious. James then extends a supper invitation to Bone so they can toast to his success. Then, when they arrive at James' house with Pinball, Bone turns to gaze at Angela. As soon as James sees, he tells Bone to come with him to the office. James informs Bone that he respects all forms of combat before displaying a samurai sword to him. But James is told by Bone that he isn't very skilled with a blade. James then discusses Franklin with Bone and informs him that Franklin is a significant weapons dealer. He explains to him that Franklin owns an expensive international combat game with a fighter who has never lost, and that he wanted to set up a match between the two of them for $5 million. If Bone defeats him, James promises he will become wealthy and never have to engage in combat again. Bone promises to give it some thought. James observes that Angela, who has been searching for drugs that James has concealed, is still being watched by Bone. Angela is instructed by James to enter the room and attempt to persuade Bone to join the battle. Bone attempts to approach Angela as she enters the room, but Angela grabs a gun and threatens him. But because Danny's companion was incarcerated, Bone was familiar with her. Before he was killed, he had suggested she and his boy, Danny, Angela's spouse and Bone's closest friend, was incarcerated as a result of James. In order to get rid of Danny, James also paid a prison group. Angela claims that James forced her to remain with him after he killed her husband and kidnapped her son, whose whereabouts she did not know until now, and that Bone blames Angela for what happened to her. She is informed by Bone that he will transport her to her son and that he knows where he is. The two then leave and appear to be having a nice time together. James is asked by Bone to accompany Angela for a while. James concurs. Angela is taken by Bone to a drug rehab facility where she is treated for her addiction before going to see her boy. James visits Franklin at his mansion and offers him $5 million in return for Franklin allowing Bone to fight his fighter. Franklin declines too. Franklin initially spoke to James in a racist manner, but in the end, he consented to set up a fight and promised him that it would begin in 3 days. Bone is taken aback by the police officers who discovered Roberto deceased. Roberto's passing saddened Tamara, because Roberto saw James murder a girl. Bone discovers that James' men were responsible for killing Roberto. Bone was consoling Tamara while they were together. James entering the room astounds Bone. James was perplexed by his ability to remain with Tamara after leaving Angela, who had taken Tamara from him. Additionally, he informed him that he had set up a match between him and Franklin's opponent. But when Bone informs James that he is still debating it and that, after debating it, he has decided not to battle, James is shocked. James was enraged and informed him that he had placed a $5 million wager. James was about to draw the blade when Bone stepped in front of him and struck him. James grabs Tamara and points the gun at her while threatening to murder her and all the kids she's caring for if Bone doesn't engage in combat. Once James had left, Bone asked Tamara to take the kids and briefly relocate elsewhere. Without any other option, Tamara requested him to leave so she wouldn't have to see him again. Teddy is instructed by James to get rid of Tamara and Bone. When Hummerman encounters Pinball, he first questions him where Bone is before hitting him. However, all of a sudden, Bone shows up and murders Hummerman along with James' other men and daughter. Because Angela was receiving care at the same facility, James informs him of her whereabouts. When Teddy and James enter the room, Pinball is there and he is pointing a gun at them, so Teddy instructs James to go kill Angela. They are all killed when a Bone strikes them from behind. Teddy was also slain by Pinball. Teddy responded when James called him, saying that he had murdered all of his men and that he would come after other murderers as well. James calls Franklin to inform him that the fight should be performed today after sending Bone his location. Because it's the case James sent him, Bone visits Franklin's estate. James walks in and stands back. They were joined by important men Franklin and James who had come to witness the fight between Bone and Franklin's fighter. James warns Bone that if he doesn't engage in combat, he will murder him today and tomorrow as well. James is warned by Bone that he will be killed for the murder of Danny, a buddy who was in prison. James was aware of Bone's desire to defend Angela. James admits to killing Danny and Roberto, but he claims he was unaware that Bone was documenting everything. He then forwarded Pinball the footage, who then informed the police about James. When Franklin's fighter shows up, he declares his intention to murder Bone. Bone engages in combat. The opposing combatant made fun of Bone. When the battle starts, Bone is aware of his opponent's high level of skill, but he still prevails after striking his foe several times. But to everyone's astonishment, Bone gave up the game before it was over, and he did it so that James would lose his $5 million worth of money. When James becomes enraged, he pulls out his sword and attempts to murder Bone. For a fair battle, Franklin orders his men to give Bone a sword. James is taken aback by Bone's proficiency with a sword, the exact opposite of what he had previously advised. James was threatening Franklin and telling him that he would betray him when Bone was able to cut off his arm and escape the scene as the police came to arrest James. Because Gerard is her son and Tamara raised him, Angela leaves the hospital after finishing her therapy and checks into the hotel. Finally, Angela and her baby are reunited. Tamara was aware that Bone was responsible and that he had come to the motel to safeguard Gerard. Bone declines Angela's request to remain with them at the hotel, telling her that his job is done and asking her to let Angela and her son stay with her instead. After bidding them farewell, he exits the hotel and assures Pinball that he will never engage in combat again. James was incarcerated in the same facility where Bone was at the start of the film. After James threatens Franklin, the group is asked to attack James. The movie stops here. We appreciate you visiting our channel.